please welcome Dr. Pamela Miller.
Well, I am deeply honored to be here, and I have totally enjoyed the wonderful planning. I will be doing 2 short readings from Jane Austen today, but I'd like to set up my first reading for you now, and many of you may not have read your Jane Austen in a while. So let me give you a little background, because it is so well written by Miss Jane Austen. If we're all human beings, we should be able to relate. It is the conversation between Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Bennet at the breakfast table. Now, the Bennets are in a difficult situation because they have 5 daughters, and the property that they are living on in Longbourn cannot pass to a daughter. It has to go to a male heir. And as Mr. Bennet says at one point, in case you've forgotten, my dear, we do not have a male heir. I think she figured it out. So basically what they have to do is find someone for their daughters to marry so that the daughters would not be destitute, and so they wouldn't lose the house, so that they would at least have a house. Now, Mrs. Bennet, who is not the wisest, most sympathetic character in all of literature, but she still has her eye on the main chance, as we say. She knows what the problem is. And Mr. Bennet, who thinks of himself as very clever, teases her, as that's the only way to put it. And so I don't know if any of you have ever had the experience with sitting around a breakfast table with 2 people who have been married quite a long time, and they know how to work each other pretty well. But that is what I am presenting to you today in the breakfast scene at the Bennets. Mr. Bennet, we definitely think, was probably reading the Times, when he is interrupted by his dear wife. "My dear Mr. Bennet, have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" Mr. Bennet was silent. "But it is," she said, "for Mrs. Long told me all about it, and she has just been here." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." "Why, my dear, you must know Mr. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four to get a look at it, and was so much delighted that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately, and some of his servants are going to be in the house by the end of the week." "What's his name?" "Bingley." "Is he married or single?" "Single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls." "How so? How can it affect them?" "My dear Mr. Bennet, how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." "Is that his design in settling here?" "Design? Nonsense! How you do talk so! But it's very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes." "I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or send them by themselves, for that will perhaps be better, for as you are as handsome as any of them, he might like you the best of the party." "Oh, my dear, you flatter me. I have had my share of beauty, but when a woman has 5 grown daughters, she ought to give over thinking about her own beauty. in most cases, there's not often much beauty to be thinking about. But my dear, indeed, you must go and see Mr. Bingley as soon as he comes into the neighborhood. Well, it is more than I engage for, I assure you. But consider your daughters. What a wonderful establishment it would be for them. Sir William and Lady Lucas are going to visit them themselves. You know, in general, they visit no newcomers. And you must go, because unless you do, we will not be able to visit them. Oh, you are over-scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley will be very happy to see you, and I will send him a few lines assuring him my hearty consent to his marrying whichever the girls he chooses. I desire you will do no such thing. There you go. You were always suggesting Lizzie, but Lizzie is not any better. Jane is twice as handsome, and Lydia is twice as good-natured, but you are always thinking of Lizzie. Well, they have none of them much to recommend them. They are all silly and ignorant like other girls. But Lizzie has a little bit more quickness. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves. You mistake me, my dear. I have a high regard for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least. Oh, but you do not know what I suffer. No, but I hope you will get over it and live to see many young men of large fortune to come into the neighborhood. It's no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not visit them. Depend on it, my dear, that when 20 such young men come, I will visit them all. They know each other pretty well. They know exactly what to do to get to each other. Many of the novels that wrote around Jane Austen's time that had the female heroines who were ever getting kidnapped and, being taken by chiefs and brigands and this and that, it was a mark of the plight of the heroine whether or not she got tea when she got captured. Tea was good for everything. When I did the one-woman show, I did about 7 different characters and traveled to different places in this country. This was a long time ago when I fit in the white dress. And I got a chance to be Elizabeth Bennet. I got a chance to be Emma. I got a chance to be Catherine Morland from Northanger Abbey, who is a delight. And Mr. Tilney is one of the most articulate of Jane Austen's heroes. But after doing these various characters over time, I think the one that had to become my favorite was Miss Bates from Emma. Because Miss Bates was very popular, although she was not young, she was not attractive, she was not exceptionally bright, and she was certainly not rich. But there was a quality in Miss Bates that I came to appreciate as more important than almost any of those other qualities. And it is because of that quality that I would like to end my program today with a glimpse at Miss Bates. This is the situation. Miss Bates, after they were planning a lovely assembly ball in Highbury, and it was going to be an opportunity for all the first families, and naturally Emma Woodhouse was the first family, to entertain their friends, everyone to get all dressed up, and to go, and Miss Bates was there with her niece, Jane Fairfax. Jane Fairfax's antecedents were foggy, but she ends up being our heroine who is most classical, the one we don't know much about her origins, but she's a natural lady, and Miss Bates just adores her niece, Jane Fairfax, and of course loves and takes care of her mother. So the thing about Miss Bates that's so unusual is she pretty much talks nonstop. So I'd like to just read to you from this, and hopefully you'll be able to imagine the people that she is interacting with, even though you only see her reaction to them. I will give you a heads up. Mrs. Elton is an insufferable snob who tries to patronize Miss Bates terribly. Okay, that's a heads up. Miss Bates and Miss Fairfax, her niece, escorted by the two gentlemen, walked into the room. And although Mrs. Elton, acting as if she, rather than Mrs. Weston, was the hostess, welcoming her gifts, opened her mouth to speak, her words, everybody's words, were soon lost under the incessant flow of Miss Bates, who came in talking and had not finished her speech under many minutes after her being admitted into the circle at the fire. As the door opened, she was heard to say, "So very obliging of you. No rain at all. Nothing to signify. I do not care for myself. Quite thick boots. Yes. And Jane declares, as soon as she was in the door, her eyes took in the room. Well, this is brilliant indeed. This is admirable, excellently contrived. Nothing wanting. I could not have imagined it. So well lighted up. Jane, look! Did you ever see anything like it? Look! Oh, Mr. Weston, you must really have had Aladdin's lamp. Oh, yes, Mrs. Weston. Very well, I thank you. Yes, I hope you are quite well. Very happy to hear it. I was so afraid, that you might have a headache, since you went back and forth because you had so much to do. How much trouble you must have gone to. Yes. Delighted to hear it, indeed. Yes. Oh, dear Mrs. Elton. So obliged to you for the carriage. Excellent time. Jane and I were quite ready. Did not keep the horses waiting a moment. No, most comfortable carriage. Yes, I'm sure our thanks are also due to you, Mrs. Weston, on that score. Miss Elton had so kindly sent a note to Jane, or we should have been, oh my gosh, 2 carriages, but 2 offers in one day, never were such neighbors. I said to my mother, upon my word, ma'am, thank you. My mother is remarkably well. Gone to Mr. Woodhouse's, I made her take her shawl, yes. The evenings are not warm. Her large new shawl. Mr. Dixon's wedding present, So kind of her to think of my mother. Bought at Weymouth, Yes, Mr. Dixon liked the olive one, but Colonel Campbell preferred this one. And there were 3 others, Jane said. They hesitated about it for some time. My dear Jane, are you sure you did not wet your feet? Are you sure? It was but a drop or 2, wasn't it? But I am so afraid. Mr. Frank. I'm so thankful to see you. There was a mat, wasn't there, for her to step on. I'll never forget your extreme politeness, Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank Churchill, I must tell you that my mother's glasses have never been at fault since. You fixed that rivet, and it has stayed fixed. My mother often talks of your good nature. Does she not, Jane? Yes, we often talk of Mr. Frank Churchill, yes. Oh, here's Miss Woodhouse. Oh, dear Miss Woodhouse. Oh, how do you do? Very well, I thank you, yes. Such a transformation. I must not compliment, I know. That would be rude, upon my word. Miss Woodhouse, you do look. How do you like Jane's hair? No hairdresser from London could have done as well. Do I hear another carriage? Oh, that would be Mr. and Mrs. Coles. Upon my word, this is charming. To be standing about among such friends, and such a noble fire. I'm quite roasted. No coffee, I thank you. Never take coffee, no. A little tea, yes. If you please, sir, by and by. A little tea, no hurry. Oh, here it comes. Everything is so good. Thank you very much.